want to start this video on the TOG by proffering a small apology for a delay in the TOG-1 video. And the reason for that is that in the last video we'd been talking about the TOG Amphibian. And I had said clearly I wanted to talk about the TOG Amphibian to get it completely out of the way so we could move on cleanly to TOG-1. Well, just like with everything else connected with the TOG, it has not worked out as simply as that. And since finishing and posting that video, I had sent off for some copies for some letters from World War I related to tank development from a small archive. I wasn't expecting within them to find a copy of the plans for the TOG Amphibian. Bear in mind, this is something I've spent several years, a lot of time and quite a bit of money looking for, copying everything I can find all over the place, national and regional archives, and come up blank. To suddenly have it turn up out of the blue was a pleasant, if poorly timed, surprise. But what it does mean on the bright side is that we have one more missing piece in the TOG saga to connect and dispose of. And really, it's quite an incredible machine. And I'm kind of excited, and I want to talk about some brief parts of it. I'm not able to show you the full plans at the moment, and that's because they're in such poor condition. They clearly had some water damage to them at some point. There's some don't ever fold plans, it leaves horrible creases. There's creases and there's some physical damage to the paperwork as well, so it needs quite a bit of cleaning up. But in the meantime, I've got the outlines for you. I'll post those in this video so you can see those, so at least we know what it's going to look like. And I'm just going to run through quickly some of the new things that I've learned about it. So, what I didn't know before, and what I had assumed, one should never assume, or you should make the most informed guesses that you can, is quite how it looked. I mean, we had the dimensions of it, we knew the turret ring, but I had assumed, for example, that this was going to be a cruiser-style turret, like the infantry amphibian, the AT-1. Boy, was I wrong. No, this uses an A-12 turret. And it's not even the BEF style A-12 turret with the coaxial Vickers 303. This is the latest type A-12 turret with the coaxial 7.92mm Baser. On top of that, we also know the shape of it. And really, the best way I can think of describing the shape is it looks like a miniature A-12 from the front. And the back half is much more reminiscent of an A-11 Matilda with a long slope, except instead of having the longitudinal rectangular vents running down the back of A-11, on this TOG Amphibian, they are behind circular dishpans which lift up, and these are that cooler interchange which we discussed in the last video. So if you guessed the shape of it from my description, kudos to you. I have tried modelling this vehicle at least 4 times from my available descriptions, and none of my efforts were even vaguely correct. For instance, the 3-foot height. Yes, it's only 3 feet high, it's a very low tank, but it's not 3 feet from the ground. This is the hull height is 3 feet independent of the ground clearance. And okay, that makes sense, but that's not really what it said. So it's not until you look at the pictures and you realize that it's now 5 feet from ground level to the top of the hull and an A-12 turret on top, then it makes a lot more sense. It certainly makes more sense for the driver, who otherwise, goodness knows where he was going to stick his head. You would either have to be supine or prone or some kind of twisted position. Either way, we now have a clear picture of a TOG Amphibian as a tank with A-12 Matilda levels of armor protection for half the weight. This thing has 3 inches of armor sloped on the front. We know the Matilda turret is 3 inches. So we have a 3-inch face of armor facing the enemy as it drives out of the water, apart from the sides, which we know are very thin. But here's another thing that we learn. is the side armour is mostly covered by the tracks. And if you are slightly familiar with the design of the medium Mark A chaser, the Whippet from World War One, you can instantly see in the plans that this design, despite it being signed by Mr. Ricardo, despite the plans coming from Ricardo's plant dated 19th of August 1940, despite all that, this tank clearly comes from the stable of William Foster & Co. It's William Tritton's signature all over this writ large. There's just no way around it. So yes, the sides are thin, but they're mostly covered by tracks. Just a small section of that upper hull where it's particularly thin is visible. The rest is covered by tracks. And more than just that, within the track unit, there is an extension coming out at the side for the mud falling off the top rollers, just like the Whippet. And indeed, there's a similar idea, although it's a little harder to see on the actual A12 itself. Then we have a side plate coming up as well, very like the Whippet. And the reason for that side plate is that's where the bearings are attached for the top rollers, for the track supports, and for the bottom rollers. There's no springing suspension at all, just to confirm that. And indeed, these rollers are almost identical to the way that you would have drawn the rollers for TOG-1, and indeed for the Whippet. They appear to be in Timken bearings, no suspension springing at all. But with that side extension coming out, with the tracks below it, we actually have a bit more effective armour on the side, protecting the crew inside, excuse me. And within those extensions, that's where those air bottles are going. So they're using that space to provide the air for the engine. So I don't really know how to sort of describe it. It's a very unusual vehicle. A12, A11 plus medium Mark A. It's definitely showing its heritage there. It's got a ton of armour, more than you can imagine. And when you come to the back end, you see once more the similarities to that medium Mark A. And that's in the drive system. So we have our petrol engine, we have a 4-speed mechanical gearbox, and we have a differential and steering, epicyclic and brakes. And then they come out and then they clearly drive a secondary drive sprocket attached by chains to the main drive sprocket. This is straight out of the World War I tank design playbook, and it's not the most efficient design because you've got a lot more moving parts, but what it allows him to do in the design is it allows him to move the sprockets further back, making this vehicle 18'9" long instead of, I don't know, it would be like 2-3 feet shorter, which you might think would be good, but then of course it's not going to be able to cross a particularly long trench either. So by extending those out, he creates a space between the horns at the back of the tank, and in this he's put 3 fuel tanks. So the medium Mark A, the Whippet, has the fuel tank right at the front under that armoured triangle, the circular fuel tank. Obviously not the ideal place for a fuel tank, so it's clearly been moved to the back here, and it's low down as well. It's almost impossible to imagine how the fuel tank could be hit from the front or even from the sides, which is good considering how little armour there is around it. But even if it was hit, obviously being that far away, it's the whole engine and transmission distance away from the crew. I mean, you physically couldn't get it any further away. It's ideal. One has to suspect you could easily put a fuel canister on the back of it as well if you needed additional range. Now, a couple of other interesting features on it worth mentioning is the driver's position. So I'd mentioned the driver doesn't have to be supine or prone anymore. In fact, he can sit nice and simply right in the middle under the mantlet, exactly as you would do on the A12. And in fact, his seat is drawn with some kind of flip or extension to it. There are steering levers and also a deep turret basket right down to the floor level of the hull. I have to be honest and say I did not expect this design to be anywhere near as good as it is looking at it. I really thought it was going to be a little bit more crude. Certainly didn't expect that level of armor, and I really am kind of impressed with how well thought out and well proportioned it is. Now, as I say, I have some more work to do on the plans to get them cleaned up and fit for publication. Certainly these are going to be going in the revamp of my Tanks of TOG book. That's an absolute certainty. And one can only hope that more luck befalls me in doing this series and some of the other missing TOG stuff turns up. Although those were a little bit more free thinking. Those are a little more up in the air than this, which at least got to paper. So whether TOG Air, the airborne TOG, ever got anywhere is unknown. But this TOG Amphibian definitely did. And the last thing of all, it has to be, I have to stop calling it the TOG Amphibian, because I finally have a name for it. Its name, wait for it, it's very exciting. It's the 14-ton special tank. I know, not very inspiring, but to actually have, after all these years, not only clear schematics, additional technical information, a direct drawing link connecting this vehicle as an unknown design to the stable of William Foster, and to have a name for it, all in the space of one fortunate document, is just incredible. So please forgive me that the TOG-1 video is a bit delayed. I mean, I'd even put out this Panther track link here to explain some of the features of TOG-1. I guess we'll come back to that another time when I do the TOG-1 video. I'm still working on a script for that. If, however, you are interested in seeing a bit more of this track link, you will find the video is available to Patreons of the channel, which ends this episode. I know it's a little shorter, but I want to thank you very much for your patience. As you can tell, I'm a little excited by finding such a big breakthrough after all this time on TOG stuff, and a very exciting design. I'm sure you'll agree. If you like my work, my books, this channel, please do subscribe. I do need your support through Patreon, or follow FWD Publishing on Facebook and WordPress, or my Amazon author page at amazon.com. And that is it. Thank you very much.